Welcome to 8th House Portal. How's everybody enjoying the gas prices? Can you imagine if they have to start rationing petrol, which might just happen? In any case, the last episode, I introduced Rudolf Steiner and some of his work. Today, I wanted to look a bit more at the way he thinks and his love of geometry. I did mention last time that one of his tutors allowed him to borrow a book and he taught himself geometry. And he was intensely absorbed in it. It wasn't just schoolwork or memorization. He described it as something inwardly very real, a form of thinking that possessed certainty. And it was independent of physical senses. And it became deeply important for him. And it suggested that thinking itself could become an experience. So then what is geometry? It's an area of mathematics relating to the study of space and the relationships between lines and points, curves and surfaces, and how things exist in space, right? Like direction, shape, distance, form, movement. And then you have these geometric relationships, how one form relates to another. So even children can understand this. For example, like a ball rolling differently than a cube would, because a cube couldn't roll, right? Or taller objects are higher. Even the difference between something being near or far. And if you just think about it yourself, a circle feels continuous or whole, whereas a triangle, if you have, of course, the base down, you don't have the triangle on its point, but it could feel more stable, very directional, and maybe even tense. And as humans, we exist spatially. We move through space. We perceive shape and think visually at times. So geometric truths can feel seen and recognized and experienced, not just memorized. A person may not know formulas, but feel balance and symmetry, harmony, proportion, maybe compression or openness. That's all geometric perception. The study of how forms behave, right? The geometric relationships are how forms influence and balance or divide or transform each other within space. I'm pretty sure there are not just one study, I'm pretty sure there are many studies that show how people equate facial symmetry to beauty. Now, in reality, it's obviously most likely a combination of that symmetry with emotion, individuality, and human presence. It may be difficult to comprehend how someone can have such a deep inner happiness for geometry. I hope that I'm trying to clarify that and explain it in a way where you can kind of sense where it's coming from. As humans, we've evolved by navigating distance and shape and orientation and patterns. That's our brains, right? Working. Our brains are specialized for spatial reasoning, like our parietal lobes, or pattern recognition, the occipital lobes and temporal lobes, or proportional relationships. So it's not just one part of your brain. It's absolutely an interconnectedness for geometry. And we see and experience it whether you've taken the subject or not. And as humans, we can experience geometry emotionally. Think about that. If some forms will evoke feelings. So symmetry can feel like harmony or stability. And if you're thinking of a sharp object, there's going to be like a tension maybe. Or if you see curves, there's a softness and a continuity. Together, it all creates an experience. Think about the geometric forms and how they can change our emotions or experience internally. So like, think about like architecture, right? Or symbols or art. Let's just do a quick experiment, right? So you can close your eyes if you want to. Imagine standing inside a narrow triangle-shaped room. Now, imagine standing inside a circular cathedral dome. Did you notice consciousness change with each space? For me, the first room I mentioned, I felt like a tension, especially in my neck for some reason. But it evokes this emotion, right? Geometry, more I feel, is a visual experience before a verbal one. I may not know how to prove an equation, but I can still intuitively sense structure and harmony and proportion, right? It actually reminds me of math class in high school or even grade school. Sometimes I would just know what the answer is and write it down. And of course, what does the teacher do? The teacher expects me to write the steps in between to show how I got the answer. I didn't know what the other steps were, or I just didn't, or even when I did try to do the other steps, I remember for whatever reason, not all the time, but I would get something wrong. And then my answer, then I'd be second guessing myself. So there's another reason why not all children can be taught the same standard curriculum, okay? In any case, I think we can also see geometry as a universal understanding, a truth. Because, for example, somebody in Canada understands a triangle the same way that someone in South Africa understands it. Or a person in Norway understands a circle. So, like, if you take that into the three-dimensional world, right? Think of the circle and its movement. They understand it a certain way, and the same way that that's understood, people in ancient Mesopotamia understood it as well. So I feel it transcends even time, not just geography. And in saying that, I'm also thinking of the solar system, right? Think of those planets and their movements. How fascinating is all of that? The orbits, right? Especially when planets appear to go retrograde. I don't know if anybody's heard about like the dance of Venus or Mars. If you just look at that, it's just amazing. So then this question comes up. So are these mathematical truths invented by us humans? Or did we just discover them? Were they realities that were already woven into our existence? Even as a child, Steiner describes feeling that the way explanations were given were incomplete because he felt that reality appeared fragmented when it was approached through only external observations. Material explanations alone were not sufficient for complete understanding. How many of us have felt that way? I know I have. When you're being taught something and it's just, you get it, but there's something missing. Something feels like it's missing. You don't know what it is because the teacher doesn't know how to explain the other part, right? It's very mechanical. And I definitely felt that through school, is there was always something in some certain subjects that there was something missing. So I can understand that. I'm not sure if anybody else has experienced that. Later on, Steiner encountered Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, someone who also rejected dead abstraction and sought living perception. You have to remember, Goethe died in 1832 and Steiner was born in 1861. So there was about 3 decades in between those two lives. But Goethe became one of the most important intellectual influences for Steiner. So we have to remember he was quite famous, right? Very important literary figure, born in Germany. He was gifted in many different subjects, right? He was an expert lawyer, a poet, a playwright. There's a lot of that I find back in that time where somebody wasn't just a doctor, they were also a scientist and a playwright, etc., right? Quite interesting. He's known for Faust, the play that kind of combines philosophy, psychology, poetry. He was writing poems at 10 years of age. He was also homeschooled. And he definitely preferred natural science and literature. Now, Faust became a journey, an exploration of knowledge, desire, meaning, consciousness and transformation. And in that play, it's quoted there, "I have studied everything and still know nothing." You can look at that as Faust being intellectual mastery, but there's no transformation of consciousness itself. So Steiner, instead of escaping thought, he begins with deepening and purifying thinking itself. Could thinking itself become more alive? From the philosophy of freedom, Steiner explains, in thinking, we have an element that unites our particular individuality with the cosmos. Why does he say that? Because thinking is seen as a connection, not just intellect. There's a participatory knowing. He also mentions from the same book that observation of thinking is the most important observation that can be made. Why? Because thinking should be experiential. There's conscious observation and wakeful awareness. And he praised Goethe because he approached nature as something living and self-revealing, not just mechanically explained. In the early 1880s, Steiner was studying in Vienna and became deeply interested in Goethe's scientific writing. And a professor, Carl Julius Schroer, recognized Steiner's ability to comprehend Goethe's work and recommended Steiner for editorial work connected to the new editions of Goethe's scientific writings. So Steiner edited, organized, commented on the scientific manuscripts. Eventually, that brought him to Weimar, where Goethe's archives were located. And this was a turning point that would profoundly shape Steiner's philosophy, his understanding of thinking, perception, the relationship between consciousness and nature. Do we ever think, like, how much of what we consider thinking is conscious? Or is it more reactive or habitual? Maybe unconscious? In the last episode, I shared a meditative practice. I want to share another one. It's the same type practice, but instead of a seed, let's use a pencil. Now, it's good to kind of use the same objects, but I mean, 2 weeks have gone by, so if you want to change the object that you used, you can definitely do that. I wouldn't recommend changing the object that you focus on every single day. I don't think that's a good idea. There has to be some type of consistency. Now, today we're going to use a pencil as an object, but don't choose a pencil that has any meaning tied to it. We're looking for an everyday object. You can either have it in front of you or you can use your imagination. You want to sit upright, breathe normally. This practice is not intended to induce altered states or escape ordinary consciousness, okay? It's meant to strengthen attention, clarity, and conscious thinking. But you still do not want to be working or driving when you do this. So we take our pencil. Not because the object itself is special, but because our attention is usually far less stable than we imagine. You can hold the pencil gently in your hand or simply place it in front of you. For the next few moments, allow your attention to remain with this one ordinary object. Observe its shape. Its length, its color. The texture of the wood. The weight of it in your hand. The point of the graphite. The fact that it was made for a purpose. Notice how quickly the mind wants to wander. A memory, a distraction, a thought about something else. Do not judge that. Simply notice it. And gently bring your attention back again and again. Now, begin thinking about the pencil more consciously. Where did it come from? The wood, the tree, the hands that shaped it. The human intention behind its creation. Notice that your thinking can either drift automatically or become directed intentionally. This is the real exercise. Not the pencil itself, but the discovery of whether your thinking is awake. Now, for a final moment, observe something very subtle. You are aware of the pencil, but you are also aware of your own thinking about the pencil. And perhaps in this quiet moment, thinking itself becomes a little more visible. When you are ready, slowly return your attention to the room around you. And you can carry this quality of consciousness, this conscious observation with you into the rest of your day. So what we were doing in this practice was directing our attention intentionally, right? We chose an object, an everyday object with no particular meaning, to discover, can I direct my thinking voluntarily? And then you're observing your thinking, right? You're focusing on an object and you're observing your thinking as well. Thinking itself becomes the object of observation. And I think what Steiner was trying to bring up was that thinking is unique because we can observe it directly without participating in it. Does that make sense? Let's introduce another practice. A simple practice for observing our thinking. Again, if you don't want to do this part, you can move on to the next section of the episode. So sit quietly for a moment. Do not try to stop thinking. Simply observe. What thought appears next? Notice how your thoughts arrive. Did you choose them? Or did they emerge on their own? Notice something else now. There is also an awareness, observing the thought. You can bring yourself slowly out of that and open your eyes if you had them closed. Steiner believed this moment when thinking becomes conscious of itself is extremely important. Most people assume that thinking is automatic, something the brain just does, right? But Steiner asked a different question. What if thinking itself could be observed? Not the content of the thought, but the living activity of thinking itself. Now, we're in an age of artificial intelligence, and so this question becomes very urgent. Because it seems that human thinking becomes entirely reactive, right? Predictable, algorithmic, then what really remains uniquely human? Steiner believed true thinking was not mechanical, it was alive. Today, we're living in a world designed to keep us reacting. Think about notifications you get on your phone. Usually, you're just reacting. You're immediately going to the notification to see what it is. And then there's algorithms, so there's endless stimulation. We are reacting before we even think. I do not like how I'm being controlled. So sometimes I just want to pick up the phone, right? Like when it's ringing, there's this thing where we just react and we'll go pick up the phone even when we're not at work. Let's, for example, say that you're home now, right? I won't pick up the phone. I'm not at work. People can't just, you can't be so impatient. You can wait to speak to me tomorrow. Unless it's an emergency, which usually it isn't. But nowadays, people make everything an emergency, right? And maybe this is why Steiner's work feels strangely modern, right? Because he believed that freedom begins at the moment reaction ends. And so then conscious thinking can begin. Perhaps the greatest spiritual crisis today is not that we think too much, but that we are rarely experiencing thinking consciously at all. Until next time, take care.